everyone, welcome back. I decided that I wanted to read a little bit more of Wayside School for you. So we already read chapters 1 through 4, so if you haven't seen them, go back to the other videos so you can watch it. So it wouldn't be confusing if you watched this one first, but you'd be missing out on a couple of funny stories. So we're on chapter 5 called Eric, and what's his name? Oh, that's right, Eric. There are 3 Erics in Mrs. Jules's class. Eric Fry, Eric Bacon, and the other one who everyone always forgets, Eric Ovens. Eric Fry is strong and fast. He is usually the first one chosen when picking teams. Eric Bacon is funny, clever, and just a little bit sneaky. Everyone in Mrs. Jules's class likes him, but no one completely trusts him. Eric Ovens is kind, quiet, and 100% trustworthy. Sadly, that kind of person is often overlooked. But not today, he thought as he sat at his desk, patiently waiting for Mrs. Jules to finish taking attendance. Today would be his day of glory. In his pocket was a plastic bag with 83 nail clippings. 2 numbers had been written on the blackboard, 71 and 2,677. So far, the class had collected a total of 2,677 nail clippings. 71 were the most brought in by any one kid. They didn't just have to be toenails, fingernails counted too. Eric Ovens took his bag out of his pocket and placed it on his desk. "How many you got?" whispered Kathy, who sat next to him. Eric didn't want to jinx his big day by saying the number aloud. Besides, he knew Kathy would only say something mean or mock him. Mrs. Jules closed her attendance book. "Anyone have any nail clippings this morning?" Eric Ovens raised his hand. "Yes, Eric," said Mrs. Jules. Eric Ovens quietly pushed his chair back, but before he could get up, he saw Eric Fry already making his way to the front of the room. 40, Eric Fry declared proudly. Eric Fry had kept his hand in a fist all morning. Everyone thought he was just trying to be tough, but now he opened his fist and let 40 nail clippings fall into the collection bucket. "Well done, Eric," said Mrs. Jules. Everyone clapped their hands. Eric Ovens smiled as he clapped his hands too. 83 was more than double 40. Eric Fry did the math on the board. 2,677 plus 40 is 2,717. "Halfway to 1,000,000, cheered Stephen. "Not quite," Allison told him. "Anyone else?" asked Mrs. Jules. Again, Eric Ovens raised his hand, but Eric Bacon had already hopped out of his seat and was headed towards the front of the room. He handed Mrs. Jules a plastic bag full of nail clippings. 349, he declared triumphantly. The class went wild. Sherry gasped, and Stephen fell out of his chair. Eric Bacon danced around Mrs. Jules's desk like a football player who had just scored a touchdown. Mrs. Jules was skeptical of the spectacle. "I could count them," she warned. Eric stopped dancing. "Go ahead," he challenged her. Mrs. Jules stared Eric Bacon in the eye. Eric Bacon stared right back. Mrs. Jules dumped the bag on her desk and divided the clippings into 4 piles. She asked Damien, Allison, and John to help. They each took a pile and Mrs. Jules added their totals together. 349, she announced, just as Eric said. Again, everyone cheered and Eric Bacon continued his victory dance. "How did you get so many?" Mrs. Jules asked him. Eric B. stopped dancing. "I went door to door, asking my neighbors," he said. Everyone laughed. Leslie had sold wrapping paper door to door, but she couldn't imagine asking people for their toenails. "It's easier than asking for money," said Eric. Everyone was happy to donate. He erased the number 71 and put 349 in its place. Then he did the math. 2,717 plus 349 equals 3,066. "Almost 1,000,000, Stephen called out. "Not even close," muttered Allison. Mrs. Jules told Eric Bacon to take a Tootsie Roll Pop from her coffee can. He took one. Then, when she wasn't looking, he took another. "Anyone else?" asked Mrs. Jules. Eric Ovens sat glumly at his desk. "Raise your hand," urged Kathy. "Why bother?" he muttered. Kathy got up from her seat and stood next to him. She grabbed Eric's arm and raised it for him. "Eric Ovens brought a whole lot," she announced. "Bring them on up," said Mrs. Jules. He had no choice. "It's just 83, he said, and then emptied his bag into the nail bucket. "That's the second most ever," shouted Kathy. She started clapping. Amazingly, everyone else started clapping too. They were still clapping as he did the math on the board. 3,066 plus 83 is 3,149. That's closer to 1,000,000, exclaimed Stephen. Everyone cheered. Even Allison couldn't argue with that. Chapter 6. Oppositosis. Not quite a real word, but we'll pretend. Eric Ovens wasn't the only one who had noticed that Kathy had become nice. Others, too, began to notice her odd behavior. I like your picture, Kathy told Bibi. What's wrong with it? Bibi asked. Nothing, said Kathy. It's perfect. You are very talented. It took Bibi a moment to realize that Kathy hadn't actually insulted her. Mrs. Jules also noticed the change. Kathy, will you come here, please? She asked. Kathy approached her desk. Yes, Mrs. Jules? She asked. Mrs. Jules smiled. You have been doing very well, Kathy, she said. I've noticed a real improvement in your work and in your attitude. That must be because you're such a good teacher, said Kathy. Well, thank you, said Mrs. Jules, but there's a tiny little problem. I'm having a hard time reading your homework. What do you mean? Well, look at it, said Mrs. Jules, showing Kathy her most recent homework assignment. What's wrong with it? Asked Kathy. First thing we learned in psychiatrist school, Dr. Pickle said as he patted DJ on the head. My hiccups are all gone, DJ told Kathy. Who cares? Kathy grumbled. Would you mind stepping inside my office, young lady? Asked Dr. Pickle. But he's the sicko, said Kathy, pointing at DJ. Please, said Dr. Pickle. She entered the counselor's office. That beard is really ugly. I guess your face must be even worse, huh? Dr. Pickle didn't get angry. He just stroked his beard and said, Very interesting. Kathy sniffed. Smells like pickles, she commented. Very interesting indeed, the counselor said, and then asked her to sit down. Kathy sat on the couch. Lumpy, she complained. I'm going to try a little experiment, said Dr. Pickle. I'm going to say a word, and then I want you to say the first word that pops into your head. Stupid, said Kathy. I haven't started yet, said Dr. Pickle. Sloppy, said Kathy. Dr. Pickle realized he had better hurry up and get started. Cold, he began. Hot, Kathy replied. Hard. Soft. Skinny. Fat. This is kind of fun, isn't it, Kathy? Asked Dr. Pickle. No, it's boring, said Kathy. Worse than I thought, said Dr. Pickle. I studied your condition in school. I'm afraid you have a bad case of oppositosis. No, I don't. You do. Dr. Pickle just stroked his beard. Unfortunately, there was no known cure for oppositosis. Other psychiatrists had tried to help their patients learn to be kind and think positively. Dr. Pickle knew that would never work on Kathy. He had his own theory, however. He could try to turn her opposites into double opposites. He opened his desk drawer and took out his pickle stone and chain. Kathy watched the green stone as it gently swung back and forth. She fell asleep on the count of 5. Can you hear me, Kathy? He asked. I could smell you, too, she replied. You are looking into a mirror, he told her. I'm looking into a mirror, Kathy repeated, her eyes closed. Tell me what you see. I see a beautiful girl with black hair, she said, and I see a funny-looking man with a pointy beard. Very good, said Dr. Pickle. Now, I want you to reach out and touch the mirror. Kathy slowly moved her arm. But as you try to touch it, said Dr. Pickle, you'll discover the mirror isn't solid. Your hand will go right through it. Kathy stuck her hand out farther. That's weird, she said. Now, stand up and walk through the mirror. Kathy stood up. She took one step, then another. She hesitated for a moment and then took one last step. "Amazing!" she exclaimed. "You are on the other side of the mirror," said Dr. Pickle. "What do you see?" Kathy looked around. "Nice office," she said. She sniffed. "Smells nice, too." "I'm glad you like it," said Dr. Pickle. "Would you like to sit on the couch?" Kathy sat back down. "Very comfortable," she noted. "When I count to 3, you will wake up, but you will still be on the other side of the mirror. 1, 2, 3. Kathy opened her eyes. "How do you feel?" he asked her. "Fine, thanks," said Kathy. "How are you?" "Very well, thank you," said Dr. Pickle. "Do you mind if we continue with our little experiment?" "Sounds like fun," said Kathy. "Happy," said Dr. Pickle. "Smile," said Kathy. "Smart." "Mrs. Jules." "Friend." "DJ." Dr. Pickle led her to the door. "Thank you, Dr. Pickle," she said, shaking his hand. "You are very wise, and I like your beard." "What's wrong with my homework?" asked Kathy. "It's written backwards," said Mrs. Jules. "Every sentence, every word, every letter, even the numbers are backwards." "Looks normal to me," said Kathy. "Do you want me to do it over?" Mrs. Jules sighed. "Oh, it's all right, Kathy. I'm just happy to see you doing so well. I'll figure it out." Now, you can't see this line here. To me, when I read it, is backwards. So you can see here that it says Kathy smiled and then returned to her seat. But when I see it, it says seat her to returned then and smiled Kathy, and even those letters are backwards. Let's do one more chapter. It's titled The Closet That Wasn't There. Mac was a curious kid. When Miss Mush served chicken fingers, he asked her how many fingers a chicken had on each hand. After lunch, he played basketball. Besides playing, he was also the self-appointed announcer, describing every shot, every pass, and every dribble. Jenny finally told him to put a sock in it. Only then, when he stopped talking, did Mac remember that he'd left his catcher's mask in the cafeteria. Mac liked to wear his catcher's mask for all sports, including basketball. He was a curious kid. The cafeteria was on the 15th floor. Mac found his mask right where he'd left it, but by then it hardly seemed worth it to go all the way back down to the playground. So he continued up to the 30th story. And there, just outside his classroom door, was the most curious thing that Mac had ever seen. Next to the wall was some sort of giant closet. Hadn't been there before lunch. But that wasn't what made it curious. The closet was wrapped up in heavy chains and locked with a giant padlock. Mac moved closer. Behind the chains, he could see double doors with a steel bar clamped across them. Several signs were taped to the doors. "Keep back. Do not open doors. Danger. Call the fire department if you smell something unusual." Mac sniffed, but all he could smell were chicken fingers. Behind the chains and the steel bar, each door had its own lock. He could see 2 keyholes, one red and the other gray. He put on his catcher's mask just to be safe and tried to open one door, then the other. They wouldn't budge. He tried to peer through the keyholes, but they were too tiny. He knocked on one of the doors. It seemed to be made of thick wood. "Anyone in there?" he called. There was no answer. He knocked again and then pressed his ear against the side of the closet. Still nothing. "What is that?" asked Dee Dee, coming up the stairs. Max shrugged. Dee Dee read the signs aloud. "Keep back. Do not open doors. Danger." She tried one of the doors. "I think it's locked," said Mac. More kids made it up the stairs. Each one stepped to the closet, read the signs, and then tried to open the doors. Well, Terrence kicked the doors. Jason rattled the chains. "Look, it's one long chain," he determined, wrapped around 4 times. "What do you think is inside?" asked Leslie. "Snakes," said Paul. He was afraid of snakes. "Spiders?" said Rondi. She was afraid of spiders. "Monsters," said Allison. She loved monsters. "What if it's Mrs. Gorf, guessed Calvin. Everyone shuddered. Whew. Mrs. Gorf was the worst teacher they'd ever had. Give me a boost, said Mac. Jenny cupped her hands and Mac stepped up, first onto Jenny's hands, then onto the steel bar. He gripped the top edge of the closet and tried to shimmy up. Get away from there, shouted Mrs. Jules. All of you! She had returned from the teacher's lounge only to see the children hanging all over the closet like monkeys. Mac, get down now! Mac tried to hop down, but his foot got tangled in the chains and he fell right onto his back. I think I broke my tailbone, he complained. You're lucky that's all you broke, Mrs. Jules said. What's inside? Asked Terence. Never you mind, said Mrs. Jules. Don't you children know the meaning of danger? You are not to go anywhere near my closet. Don't look at it. Don't even think about it. It's not there. But I can see it, said Mac, still lying on the floor. It's not there, Mrs. Jules insisted. But no ifs, ands, or buts, said Mrs. Jules. Everyone shuffled inside the classroom. Mac was still on the floor. He stood up and adjusted his catcher's mask, which had become cockeyed when he fell. He took one last look at the closet that wasn't there, then walked into the classroom, more curious than he'd ever been. So the next video, when we go over it, will be science. Wonder where they're climbing up. See if you can maybe guess. Hope you're enjoying it as much as I am. Bye, guys.